When most people think about the expenses that come with buying a home, almost everybody only thinks about the down payment. But what about closing costs? What are closing costs and how much are they? Stay tuned to find out. What's going on, guys? Brandon here with Remax Results, bringing you another video on all things real estate. And today we're going to be talking about what exactly are closing costs and how much are they. But first, before we get started, if you guys can do me a quick favor, make sure to hit the subscribe button below and don't forget to hit the little bell notification so that you're notified when I post new videos. All right, so what are closing costs exactly? Well, closing costs are a combination of different fees, prepaid expenses, and other miscellaneous costs that are associated with buying a home. And just like the name suggests, they are paid at closing. One other thing that you need to note is that both buyers and sellers have their own set of different closing costs. So in order to determine how much yours are going to be, you need to know which side of that transaction you're on. So let's start with the buyer side. So as a buyer, one of the first fees that you'll see for the closing is the lender fee, or otherwise called the origination fee. And this is basically just the commission that the lender gets for giving you the loan. You'll also see title fees on there, which again, just like lender fees, is a commission paid to the title company that does the title search. So the title search is basically when they look through the home's history and make sure that there's no liens on the property or that no one else has claim to that property. Buyer's closing costs will also include prepaid expenses like homeowner's insurance, any property taxes that are due for that month, upfront interest, and then also, depending on the kind of loan that you use, or if you put less than 20% down, you'll also have private mortgage insurance that you'll have to pay. Now, sellers, on the other hand, have their own set of closing costs. For instance, you're not going to have lender fees or title fees on the seller side because there's no loan involved for the seller. But if the seller has an existing loan to pay off, then that's going to be part of their closing costs. So if they're selling their house, but they still have a balance on their previous loan, most of that money or some of that money is going to go to pay off that previous loan. One of the biggest differences between seller closing costs and buyer closing costs is the realtor fee. Now, a lot of people don't realize that the seller is paying for both the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. So again, as a buyer, you're paying $0 for a real estate agent. That both comes out of the seller's closing costs. And typically, depending on, the agency, the realtor that you're working with, that fee will normally be around 6% of the property, the purchase price of the property. So how much can I expect to pay in closing costs? Well, unfortunately, there's no surefire method to determine down to the dollar what your closing costs are going to be beforehand, just because there's so many different factors that go into it, like the type of lender that you use and what their origination fee is. The type of loan that you use can determine how much your closing costs are going to be, property taxes, things like that. But a surefire way, or not a surefire way, but a typical method to use to determine how much your closing cost is going to be is to take 3% of whatever the purchase price of the property is, and that will kind of get you in the ballpark. Now, I know what you're saying, 3%, another 3%, like I have to put 3.5% down as the down payment already, then I have to come up with another 3% for closing costs. Well, there are a few different ways to kind of get around some or all of the closing costs, and we'll talk a little bit about that right now. So one of the first ways to get rid of some or all of the closing costs is to ask the seller to pay for them, some or all of them. Now, you can ask for a specific amount. You can ask for a specific percentage. It really just depends. Each offer is different. The one thing I will say is that during a seller's market, in which we're currently in right now, where there's low inventory and a lot of buyers on the market, it is very highly unlikely that a seller will pitch in to help with your closing costs. But, it never hurts to ask. The second method is you can have your lender pay for some or all of your closing costs. And typically, if a lender does this, they'll charge you a slightly higher interest rate than you would have had if you had paid for your own closing costs. So it's a good way to not have to come out with, all that money up front, or even, some of that money up front. But again, over the life of the loan, you will pay typically a little bit higher interest rate. And then the last method that you can use is using some sort of down payment / closing cost program. So for instance, with Minnesota Housing, you can borrow up to $17,000 to help you pay for down payment and closing costs. So again, this is a good method for someone who, either you don't want to spend all of that cash up front, or maybe you don't have the cash up front. This is something that you could possibly look into. And that is it on today's video on closing costs. Hopefully this helped you guys. If it did, make sure to hit the like button below. And if you have any questions about closing costs, you want to talk about them a little bit more, or you have questions about any of the things I mentioned in the video, you can either send me an email or you can leave a comment below. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next video, and make sure to hit that subscribe button.